Many times throughout history, warfare has changed focuses, sometimes in very jarring ways. An example was when people progressed from using swords and bows to muskets and cannons. Francis Marion was an American general during the American Revolution who also changed the way war was fought. Marion was born on a plantation, South Carolina, and lived there his whole life. Marion fought in the French and Indian War, where he fought against the Cherokee. During the beginning of the Revolution, Marion fought for the United States Army. After the siege of Charleston, which resulted in the fall of Charleston, Marion formed a partisan band. Marion's partisan band stayed within South Carolina, and he would surprise attack the British soldiers. Marion became known for his tactics of ambushing the British and then running into the swamps, where the British couldn't get to. This is how he earned earned the nickname the Swamp Fox. He mostly stayed alone in his work, but occasionally worked with others. Marion later worked with Nathanael Greene during the Battle of Eutaw Springs. This shows how he was willing to work with others during the war. The impact of his life was popularizing guerrilla warfare and helping win the Revolutionary War. Francis Marion was an important military leader who broke barriers of conventional warfare. Fighting in lines came about during the 1600s because muskets were very inaccurate. To fix this, commanders made the soldiers fight in rows, thus as to maximize firepower. The strategy was soon used by nearly everyone using muskets at the time because it reduced the effects of inaccuracy of musket. This strategy increased more after the invention of bayonets, because then they could likewise fight in melee. This strategy was used for 200 years with little to no change, despite the increasing casualties during the wars. According to William McLaughlin, the lethality and inaccuracy of the muskets forced generals to begin to lump soldiers together so some shots were guaranteed to hit their target. This shows how the idea of soldiers fighting in lines using the musket was used when Francis Marion was around. Using this strategy, many wars were won or lost, and people from George Washington to Napoleon used this during their battles. This is significant because it gives information about the barrier that Francis Marion broke. The influence of the barrier was numerous. It caused empires to rise and fall. It caused an age of colonialism throughout the world. The barrier, line formation, impacted many events through the 200 years it was used. So it was the primary strategy that was used in war from the 17th century to the beginning of the 20th century. Using line strategy, Napoleon conquered most of Europe. In his article, Max Boot talks about how the American Revolution was a combination of ideas with conventional warfare and guerrilla warfare. All the way up to the Franco-Prussian War, line formation was used commonly in combat. Line formation was used for 200 years and was effective for that time. This is significant because it tells the impact of using line formation. The impact was that all of these events changed many things throughout history. After Napoleon, the alliances that were set up that caused World War I. Colonialism meant the entire continent, such as Africa, were under European control. In 1757, Francis Marion started fighting at the French and Indian War. Marion fought for the British mostly against their former ally of the Cherokee. They beat the Cherokee and burned many other villages to starve them out and make them surrender. But Francis Marion did learn something valuable from the Cherokee that he beat. Reed states, but it did teach Marion some important lessons about how to fight a war. The Cherokee did not fight in the traditional manner either. Facing an overwhelming force, they used the landscape to their advantage and emerged to fight only when they held a significant advantage. Marion quickly realized that these tactics could be incredibly effective. At the beginning of the Revolutionary War, the Americans and British fought using the standard line strategy with lines. The traditional line strategy played into the strength of the British as they had superior numbers of soldiers, training, and weapons. Lucky for America, Francis Marion escaped capture at Charleston as he had broken his ankle and was not in the city when it fell. He stayed at his plantation until his injuries had healed, which were after the Battle of Camden. Camden caused most of South Carolina to fall into British hands. But Francis was finally ready. He formed a partisan band of both whites and African Americans and started to use the strategy they had learned from the Cherokee when he fought against them. Based upon this strategy, he learned from fighting the Cherokee. He used landscape to quickly ambush the British in quick attacks that did not allow the British to use their line strategies, and then retreat quickly back into the swamps and woods of South Carolina. After Colonel Bannister Tarleton chased Marion for a long way through the swamps, he was credited with saying, "But as for this darned old fox, the devil himself could not catch him." After this, Marion became known as the Swamp Fox. This had a greater impact than the previous strategy. This is significant because it tells how Francis Marion learned to use guerrilla warfare and how he earned his nickname. The impact of this was that since Francis Marion learned guerrilla warfare, he was able to use it in the American Revolution and to overcome his barrier.
Although Francis Marion wasn't the only Revolutionary era figure to use irregular troops and guerrilla tactics, he certainly used them most famously and to greatest effect as he fought against the British occupation of South Carolina. Marion combined to great effect the key elements of stealth, agility, and attention to terrain. These were tactics that he learned from the Cherokee, who he fought against as a young man in the French and Indian War. Marion's exploits confounded the British. They struck fear into local Tories, and the mystique of the Swamp Fox brought hope and security to the Patriots.
Marion has a mixed legacy in history. He was a war hero who fought against the British and influenced history. He was also a slave owner for his entire life and did not oppose it. He was additionally brutal against the Cherokee who fought against it in the French and Indian War and helped create the Trail of Tears that sent Native Americans from their homes. Francis Marion would burn down entire villages in the hopes of starving out his enemies and killed innocent people. In an article, it states, "Some Brits still feel pang of resentment from Marion's guerrilla styling." British author Neil Norman, writing on the Evening Standard, called Marion a thoroughly unpleasant dude who was basically a terrorist. This shows his mixed legacy amongst people today. This also shows how some people will claim Francis Marion was not as important as he was. This is significant as it includes information of what Francis Marion influenced in his legacy. It impacted the Cherokees whose house he burned down. However, it is additionally a significant impact to the people of the United States who live free from Great Britain. There are two main reasons that people deny Francis Marion broke barriers of conventional warfare. The first is that he just took his strategy from the Cherokee who he fought against. This one is partly true, as he did take it from the Cherokee, but he helped to popularize the use of guerrilla warfare among the Europeans. The second reason is his brutality to the British and Cherokee. This is also true, but this does not take away from his accomplishments of using guerrilla warfare. This shows that, like most historical figures, the impression of Francis Marion is mixed. He did a great deal of good, like revolutionizing guerrilla warfare and changing the way warfare works, but also did a great deal of bad, like owning slaves and burning Cherokee villages. Francis Marion was an important military general who changed the way warfare worked forever. If Francis Marion never existed, the world would be a very different and changed place. The line formation probably would not still be used, as it was phased out during World War I because of improvements in artillery. For example, the line strategy cost the French 200,000 casualties in the first months of World War I. Guerrilla warfare probably would not be used nearly as much. Francis Marion helped to popularize it, and a different strategy of warfare would be used instead, like trench warfare or blitzkrieg. South Carolina would have fallen to the British, because at one point only Francis Marion and his partisan band were defending South Carolina. If South Carolina fell to the British, then they could focus on moving north to North Carolina and Virginia, increasing the likelihood that the United States might lose the war for independence. Only with Francis Marion the United States could have won the war. Francis Marion changed the world by breaking barriers of conventional warfare. After the war, Francis Marion went back to rebuild his plantation, married his cousin, served as a South Carolina state senator, and died at the age of 63. He will forever be known as the Swamp Fox, the controversial man who broke conventional warfare barriers and popularized guerrilla warfare for both the United States and Europe.